I was left at a bus station when I was 8. They called 31 times in one morning, 20 years later. Most people have a memory of being dropped off somewhere as a kid. The grocery store. Birthday party. Soccer practice. Maybe grandma's house on a Friday night. My drop-off memory is different. I remember being left at a Greyhound bus station in the middle of January with no coat, a backpack with nothing in it, and my brother's old sneakers on my feet, 2 full sizes too big. My mom told me she'd be right back. My brother, Derek, waved from the passenger seat like I was seeing him off on a vacation, not the other way around. Before the car even rolled out of the parking lot, he'd already made a bet. $10 says she's crying before we hit the highway. I was 8 years old. I did not cry. I also did not find my way home. But I found something better. And when they came knocking 20 years later, 31 missed calls on a Tuesday morning before I'd even had my coffee, I had already built a life so full and so mine that there wasn't a single empty seat at the table for any of them. Welcome back to Still Standing Strong. Get comfortable. Grab your coffee or your tea or whatever gets you through a Tuesday. Today's story is about what it looks like when the people who were supposed to love you throw you away, and about the ones who pick you up like you were never trashed to begin with. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button, drop something in the comments, and settle in. This one's going to live in your chest for a while. The last thing my mother, Sandra, said before she pulled out of that parking lot was not "I love you." It was, "Let's see how long it takes you to figure it out." January. Grover Falls Bus Terminal, Kentucky. A drafty concrete building at the edge of a 2-stoplight town that the interstate had long since forgotten. I'd been picked out of the back seat of my mom's Ford Explorer like a piece of furniture she'd decided didn't match the new place. Derek was 13. He had one knee propped against the dashboard and the kind of grin that only makes sense if you already know the punchline. My mother looked back at me the way someone looks at a parking ticket, like it was inconvenient that I existed. "Get out," she said. So I got out. Because when you're 8, you do what your mother tells you. Even when it makes your stomach feel like a wet paper bag. The shoes were Derek's hand-me-downs, white, scuffed, flopping off my heels with every step. My backpack had nothing in it because she'd told me to pack it that morning and I hadn't known what to put inside. So I zipped it up empty and carried it anyway, like a prop in a play I hadn't been given a script for. Derek leaned out the window. $10 says she cries before we hit the highway. My mother didn't correct him. She just dropped the car into drive. Here's what I know about the moment right before someone does something they can never undo. They make it sound like nothing. They keep their voice flat. They use small, throwaway words. The damage is always hiding inside the most ordinary-sounding sentence. The taillights shrank to 2 red dots in the January gray. Then nothing. I stood on that bus platform for close to 3 hours. I counted the buses that didn't stop, 5 of them rumbling through without slowing, sending cold exhaust air across my face. I didn't know it yet, but the woman who was about to change my whole life was sitting on a bench 12 feet away from me with a paperback novel tucked under one arm and a cup of gas station coffee going cold in her hand. Helen Foster was 54 years old. Retired middle school art teacher. 27 years in the classroom. She'd driven to Grover Falls that morning to pick up her sister who was coming in from Nashville, except the bus was running late, which Helen had suspected, which is why she'd brought the paperback. She had the kind of patience that could only come from spending 3 decades trying to teach 12-year-olds the difference between watercolor and acrylic. She told me later that she noticed the shoes first. A child in shoes that don't fit is a child somebody dressed in a hurry, or a child nobody dressed at all. She didn't crouch down and do that thing adults do where they use a baby voice to try not to scare you. She just walked over, sat down on the bench next to mine, and said, "Have you eaten?" I shook my head. She walked to the vending machine by the restrooms and came back with a pack of peanut butter crackers and a small orange juice. She sat back down and didn't say a word while I ate. She didn't ask me where my parents were. She didn't ask me anything. She just let me eat and she stayed. That was the first kind thing anyone had done for me in a day that felt like it had lasted a whole year. She called the police from her cell phone. She stayed with me until they came. She didn't make me explain myself. When the officers arrived, I answered all their questions in a flat voice because I had already decided, somewhere between the third and fourth bus that rumbled past without stopping, that crying wasn't going to bring the explorer back. The last thing I said to the officers was a question. Is my mom coming back? They looked at each other in that way adults look at each other when they don't want to answer. Helen squeezed my hand once before the officers walked me inside. She said, "I'll check on you, okay?" She meant it. She checked on me every single week. The state gave my mother 2 chances to come get me. She passed on both of them. First time, she said I ran away. She told that to the caseworker, a woman named Brenda, who had a lanyard covered in keychains and a folder with my name on it that got thicker every week, over the phone the morning after I was found. I was sitting outside Brenda's office in a plastic chair, legs swinging, walls thin enough that I could hear every word. "She's safe, Ms. Monroe. She's at county intake. We can arrange pickup today." My mother's voice, tiny through the speaker. She ran off. I can't control her. She does that. I was 8 years old. I had never run anywhere in my life. The farthest I'd ever gone alone was the end of the driveway to get the mail. The second attempt came by certified letter. My mother's husband, Frank, signed for it instead of her and wrote in the margin, "We're not set up for another kid right now." Another kid. Like I was a stray cat that had wandered into the wrong yard. I stopped asking about going home on day 4. Not because I gave up. Because I made a decision, even at 8 years old, that the version of home I'd been living in wasn't worth begging for. 14 months. 2 foster families. Neither bad, neither permanent. Just beds and rooms that belong to someone else with towels folded in that specific way that tells you you're a guest, not a resident. 14 months later, a woman who owed me absolutely nothing signed a stack of legal paperwork that said she wanted me. Helen's house was on a dead-end street called Maple Creek Road in Clover Ridge, Virginia, a small enough town that the hardware store doubled as a post office on Wednesdays. Her house was pale blue, with a front porch that had a swing that squeaked on the left side, and a backyard garden full of herbs, flowers, and the most aggressive tomato plants I have ever seen in my life. She drove a 2003 Subaru with a dent in the rear bumper and an NPR bumper sticker that had been there so long it had started to peel at the corners. She was not wealthy. She was not connected. She was a retired teacher living on a pension who decided that a child alone at a bus station in January deserved a fighting chance. She taught me to read properly, not just the words but what was underneath them. Every evening after dinner we'd sit on the porch swing, even in cooler weather with a blanket across our laps, and read out loud. She always picked books with women in them who solved their own problems. I didn't understand why until I was a lot older. She taught me to paint. Watercolors first, then acrylics on canvas. She said art was how you said the things that didn't fit into regular words. Her house was full of paintings, some hers, some her students', some mine, framed and hung like they mattered because to her they did. She had a best friend named Patrice Washington, a family attorney, 60 years old, sharp as a box cutter in a cashmere sweater. They'd been friends since they were both in their 20s. Patrice had handled Helen's estate planning, driven her to every doctor's appointment that ever scared either of them, and once showed up at Helen's door with a casserole so dense that Helen used the dish as a doorstop for a week before either of them said anything about it. And there was one more person in our little world, Miss Yvonne, who lived 3 houses down on Maple Creek Road and had been Helen's neighbor for 30 years. She was in her late 60s, a retired postal worker who knew every family in Clover Ridge by name and didn't tolerate foolishness from anyone. She showed up 2 weeks after I moved in with a plate of oatmeal cookies and a look that said, "I'm watching to make sure this child is all right." She became, without any official paperwork, a kind of grandmother. She came to every school play, every art show, every potluck at Helen's house. She was the one who taught me to make biscuits from scratch, and she never let me forget it. That was my family. 3 women on a dead-end street in Virginia who had chosen me. Helen told me something once on a night when I couldn't sleep. One of those nights when the question of why is so loud you can't get past it. She said, "Lexi, nobody gets to hand you a bill for surviving something they caused. What you owe this world is a life that proves them wrong." I wrote that down on a note card and taped it inside my school locker. I never took it down. For 20 years, my birth mother Sandra didn't look for me. And I returned the favor. Helen died on a Thursday morning in March. A stroke in her sleep. The doctors said it was fast. I have spent 2 years deciding whether that's a genuine comfort or just the thing medical people are trained to say to the person standing in the hallway in yesterday's clothes who forgot to eat. I was 27. I'd been working at the Clover Ridge Youth Arts Center for 4 years by then, first as a weekend workshop instructor, then as the full program coordinator. Helen came to every single event I organized. Every student art show, every open mic night for the teens, every summer mural project. She always sat in the 3rd row and clapped like I'd just cured something. She left me the house on Maple Creek Road, the garden, the Subaru, a studio full of art supplies, 3 shelves of books arranged in an order only she fully understood, and a note written on the back of a grocery receipt tucked inside a copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God. Water the tomatoes in May. Paint something ugly in November, that's when you'll need it most. And never, ever let anyone make you small. She also left a sealed envelope, no address already stamped, in a drawer beneath some old tax returns and a handwritten peach cobbler recipe. I found it 3 months after she passed. I didn't understand it right away. I would. I became the director of the Clover Ridge Youth Arts Center the following year. The board said Helen would have been proud. I told them she would have said, "Well, it's about time, now go get better chairs for the kids." The idea to rename the center's main gallery after Helen hit me 8 months into the job. We'd been fundraising for a proper, permanent children's creative space, a room with good lighting, low supply tables, paint-proof floors, and a wall where kids could hang their work without anyone taking it down until the next semester. A room where a kid who'd never held a paintbrush could walk in on a Tuesday afternoon and not feel like they were in the wrong place. I spent 4 months on the fundraising. Bake sales, a community raffle, a silent auction where someone paid $90 for a small oil painting Helen had done of the creek behind her house. The room was almost ready. New flooring, open shelving, a reading nook in the corner because Helen always said art and stories belonged in the same room. On the Monday before the dedication, I went down to the center's storage room to grab some extra folding chairs and found a cardboard box I hadn't opened since Helen's estate had been cleared. Personal, letters was written on the flap in her handwriting. Inside, 5 envelopes, all addressed to the same name. Sandra Monroe. Helen had written to my mother. 5 letters over 10 years. Dates. A 1st grade report card. A school photo from 3rd grade where I was missing a front tooth and holding a painted clay bowl I'd made. A letter that said, "She is doing beautifully. She has a real gift. If you would ever like to visit, I would be happy to make arrangements." Not one letter had been answered. But one had been returned. On the outside of the envelope, in blue ballpoint ink, in handwriting I recognized from grocery lists a lifetime ago. "Stop sending these. She's not mine anymore." My phone was sitting face down on my desk upstairs. It had been quiet all morning. And then, like it had been waiting for the exact worst moment to start screaming, it lit up. 31 missed calls. 3 different numbers. 14 voicemails. All between 5:47 a.m. and 9:15 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. I pressed play on the first one. "Lexi. Derek. Your brother." A pause, like that needed clarification. "Mom is sick. Real sick. Cancer. You need to call me back today." I pressed play on the 5th one. His voice had shifted. Tighter. Hotter. Like a radiator that's been ignored for too long. "I know you're getting these. I drove 6 hours to find out where you were and you won't pick up the phone. Don't be selfish, Lexi. This isn't about you. I pressed play on the 10th one. A different voice. A woman. Soft, careful. Hi, Lexi. My name is Melissa. I'm Derek's wife. I'm sorry to bother you. Your mother is in hospice up in Hartwell. She's been asking for you. She says your name almost every night now. I know this is a lot. But please call us back. When someone reaches out after doing something they know was wrong, they never just send one message. They flood the line. It's guilt dressed up as urgency. 31 calls that all mean the same thing. We need something from you and we've run out of other options. I sat down on a folding chair in that storage room, Helen's letters in my lap, and listened to all 14 voicemails back to back. Pattern was real clean. Voicemails 1 through 4, sympathy. Derek's voice soft and rehearsed, like he'd practiced it in the car. She really needs you, sis. 5 through 9, frustration bleeding through. You owe this family, Lexi. 10, Melissa again, softer, trying to patch the damage Derek had already done. 11 through 14, threats. Not the kind you call the police about. The social kind. People in your town are going to find out what kind of daughter you are. Pastor already knows you won't come. He'd already started his campaign. Before I even pressed play on the first message, he was laying groundwork. I called Patrice at 7:30 that morning. Patrice Washington, estate attorney, Helen's best friend, the woman who had filed injunctions before her first cup of coffee and didn't blink twice at anything. Don't call them back yet, she said without even a hello. Let me find out what's actually going on. I went to work. I taught a Tuesday afternoon watercolor class for 8-year-olds. I answered emails about the dedication. I helped a 13-year-old named Marcus figure out why his acrylic paint kept cracking, which turned out to be a humidity problem and not a personal failing, which is a lesson that applies to more than just painting. I watered Helen's tomatoes when I got home. And I did not pick up the phone. Patrice called Thursday evening at 6:45, which told me everything I needed to know. Patrice never called that late unless the news required wine. Here's what I found. I could hear her reading glasses hit the table. Sandra Monroe, 54 years old. Lung cancer, stage 4, hospice facility in Hartwell. Derek Monroe, 33, filed for bankruptcy in February. Lost the house in August. Almost lost it. That's where it gets complicated. She paused. I poured the wine myself. Here's the part you need to hear. I made some calls. Sandra has been a member of Cornerstone Baptist in Hartwell for about 17 years. Div. Prayer circle, women's ministry, the whole thing. And she has been telling that congregation for 20 years that her daughter ran away as a little girl. That she spent years looking for her. That she's been grieving ever since. I set down my glass. She told them you left, Lexi. That she tried to find you. That it broke her heart. Their pastor, a man named Garfield, has organized prayer circles for her multiple times over the years. The entire church believes she is a mother in mourning. Some families don't break apart. They were never actually together, they just sat close enough in the same house to look like they were. She doesn't want your forgiveness, Patrice said, her voice dropping. She wants your face in that room. There's a real difference. If you show up at that hospice, sit next to that bed, let Pastor Garfield see you, her story holds. She gets to die as the mother whose long-lost daughter finally came back. If you don't show up, 20 years of fiction starts to fall apart. My birth mother had been telling people I abandoned her. The woman who left an 8-year-old at a bus station in January had spent 2 decades telling a church full of people that it was the 8-year-old who left. Derek showed up at the arts center on a Wednesday afternoon. I saw him through the front window before he saw me. He was standing in the parking lot in sunglasses, overcast day, 48 degrees, looking at the building like he was appraising it for a sale. I waited until the after-school kids had cleared out. He was leaning against a pickup truck with a cracked taillight when I walked outside. He opened his arms when he saw me. I kept mine at my sides. Lexi. He said it warm. Rehearsed warm. Derek. Mom asks for you every single night. He delivered it the way someone delivers a line they've been polishing in the car for 6 hours. When did you find out where I was? He blinked. What? When did you find out where I was? Where I lived. He looked away. Looked at his truck. Couple years back, I think. When Helen's obituary ran in the paper. 2 years. They'd known where I was for 2 years. They reached out only when they needed something. You bet $10 I'd cry before I moved. I was 8. Do you remember that, Derek? His jaw shifted. Come on, Lexi. We were kids. That was 20 years ago. You were 13. And she was 34. Neither of you were kids. He didn't have an answer for that. I got in the Subaru, rolled the window down 2 inches. Don't come to the center again. He stood in that parking lot watching me drive away. I wondered for just a second if that was how I'd looked, small, still, watching taillights disappear. Except I was 8. And I wasn't the one who deserved to be left standing there. Pastor Garfield called on a Saturday morning. Pastors always call on Saturday mornings when they want you to feel the weight of Sunday coming. Lexi, my name is Jim Garfield. I'm the pastor at Cornerstone Baptist over in Hartwell. Your mother's church. His voice was steady and kind, the kind of voice that fills a room without needing to be loud. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. Your mother is very ill. I've known her for close to 15 years, and I can tell you she talks about you constantly. Whatever happened between you two, and I know families are complicated, this may be your last chance to make things right. With all due respect, Pastor, you don't know what happened between us. A beat. Sandra told me everything. She told me you left home very young. That she's carried that pain for a long time. She told you I left. She did. I closed my eyes. 20 years of someone else's fiction, blessed by a good man who never thought to ask a follow-up question. I was 8 years old, Pastor Garfield. Silence. I let it sit right there on the line between us. He didn't ask the obvious follow-up. I didn't volunteer it. Not yet. Not to him. Not over the phone. By Monday, 2 women from my own town, women who came to art shows at the center, women I knew by name, had texted me. Gentle messages. Heard about your mom. So sorry, Lexi. Hope you'll reach out. Life's too short. Derek had done his work. He'd come to Clover Ridge, talked to people, planted the seed. Grieving mother. Ungrateful daughter. Simple story. Easy to believe. 5 people who barely knew me told me what kind of daughter I should be. Not one of them asked what kind of mother she was. I know some of you watching this have gotten that call. The one where someone you haven't talked to in years suddenly needs you to show up and play a part in their story. And everyone around you is whispering, just go, just let it go, be the one who rises above. But not a single one of those people is asking what it took just to get yourself upright in the morning after what happened to you. If that's you, drop a comment. I genuinely want to hear how you handled it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now would be a real good time. This story isn't done. Helen kept everything. Report cards, crayon drawings, vaccination records, progress notes from every parent-teacher conference she'd attended in my place, and 5 letters that were never answered. I'd already found them once, the morning of the 31 calls, but I'd only read the one with Sandra's handwriting on the outside. Now, with Derek's visit and Pastor Garfield's call pressing down on me like weather, I went back to the storage room and read all 5. First one, written when I was 9. Dear Sandra, Lexi is settling in well. She had a wonderful first week at Clover Ridge Elementary. She loves painting. I've enclosed a photo from last week's school picnic. The third, when I was 13. Lexi made honor roll this semester. She is kind, she is patient, and she deserves to know you. If you'd like to visit, I will arrange everything. The 5th when I was 18. I've written you 5 times now. I will not write again. But I want you to know that she is becoming someone extraordinary. You are missing it. Helen had tried. For 10 years, she had quietly reached across that silence with school photos and report cards and open invitations, and received nothing back except one returned envelope with 5 words in blue ballpoint ink. Stop sending these. She's not mine anymore. Sandra hadn't even opened that last letter. The envelope was still sealed inside. A school photo still tucked behind it. A picture of me at 11, gap-toothed, holding a clay vase I'd made in Helen's kitchen. Grief makes people do strange things. But this wasn't grief. This was a fully awake woman on an ordinary afternoon, deciding with a cheap ballpoint pen exactly how much a child was worth to her. She did the math and mailed back the answer. I put that envelope in my coat pocket and decided the dedication speech was going to need to be longer than I'd planned. The second phone call came without any warm-up. "Listen," Derek said. "No hello. Mom's got maybe 6 weeks. If you don't show up, I will make sure everyone in your little town knows you walked away from a dying woman." "You mean the way she walked away from me at a bus station? That was 20 years ago. Get over it. You were 13, Derek. You knew exactly what was happening." "Here's the deal," he said, voice shifting into something colder and more deliberate. "The house back in Hartwell, Mom put your name on the deed when you were 5. Some property tax thing. I need you to sign the paperwork so I can sell it." I leaned back in my chair. Helen's kitchen clock ticked above the stove. The garden was dark outside the window. Now we're getting somewhere. What? This was never about Mom crying my name in the night, was it? This is about a signature on a piece of paper and a house that's going under faster than your credit score. 3 seconds of silence. "Then you owe this family, Lexi. Mom raised you for 8 years. She raised me for 8 years and then left me at a bus station in January without a coat." He hung up. Patrice spread the documents across her kitchen table the way a surgeon lays out instruments, carefully with the understanding that someone was about to get cut. "Here's the situation." She tapped the deed with her pen. "Sandra added your name to the property years back when you were around 5. Property tax benefit. Claiming a dependent reduces the assessed rate in that county. Your name is on the house. Derek cannot sell without your signature. I don't want the house, Patrice. I know that. But he doesn't know that. And right now, your signature is the only reason any of them are calling you." She looked at me over her glasses, the same look she'd given Helen 100 times. "The look that means I know what you're about to do, and I need you to be sure. What do you want to do, Lexi?" I looked at the documents. Derek's bankruptcy filing. Sandra's hospice intake form. The deed with my name on it in a font I obviously hadn't chosen. I want to give my speech at the dedication. And I want to tell the truth. All of it. She took off her glasses. "You understand that once you say it in front of that room, it's out. Sandra's church will hear about it. Derek loses whatever leverage he thinks he has. And you become the woman who told the truth about her own mother at a public event. I become the woman who told the truth. Period." Therese nodded once. Slow. The nod of a woman who has read enough case files to know when someone's mind is already made up. "Then I'll be there. 3rd row." They sent the wife next. That's what people do when the threats stop working. They send someone softer. Same goal, different wrapping paper. Melissa called on a Thursday night, 2 days before the dedication. "Lexi, I'm sorry to bother you again. I know Derek's been aggressive, and that's not how I would have handled any of this. I want to apologize for that." Her voice was warm, measured, genuine sounding. "Sandra really does ask for you. Not in the church pew way where everyone can see. The other kind, the kind that wakes me up at 2 in the morning because the sound of it comes right through the wall." Something in me moved. Just a little. Like a floorboard checking its own weight. Melissa was good. She knew exactly where to press. I know what she did was wrong, she continued. Derek told me about the station. All of it. And I'm truly sorry. 11 seconds of silence from me. 'Cause for 11 seconds I felt that old pull. The pull of the little girl who still wanted to hear I'm sorry from someone in that family. Anyone. Also, Melissa said, the house situation, Derek really needs that signature. The bank has been calling every day now. You could just... And there it was. Thank you for being honest, Melissa. Even if you didn't mean to be. The soft voice on the phone and the warm apology, you learn to listen for the pause. The tiny gap where the real ask hides behind the kindness. Melissa almost had me. For exactly 11 seconds, I felt something starting to give. Then she said the bank and just sign and everything sealed right back up. The night before the dedication, I sat on Helen's porch. Tober in Virginia. Crickets still going strong. The garden was winding down for the season. Tomato stakes bare but standing, the herb beds getting thin, everything resting and waiting for what came next. I thought about the bus station. Cold. The sneakers flopping off my heels. The orange juice with the straw bent sideways. I thought about what I was going to do the next morning and what it was going to cost. Not money. Not even reputation, really. Something smaller and sharper than both. I was going to stand in a room full of people I respected, people who had watched me build something from nothing, and show them the part of myself I'd spent 20 years carefully folding away. The part that was left. The part that wasn't chosen. The part that someone weighed at 8 years old and decided wasn't worth the trouble. Helen's voice came through the floorboards the way it always did when I needed it. Nobody gets to charge you rent for surviving the fire they started. What you owe yourself is a life built on your own terms. I went to sleep with the speech on the kitchen table and the returned envelope tucked into the inside pocket of Helen's navy blazer, the one she wore to school board meetings and ribbon cuttings and every single graduation she ever attended as a civilian because she just loved watching young people cross a stage. Tomorrow, one of those two things was going to change everything. They showed up 20 minutes before the ceremony started. Derek walked into the Helen Foster creative space like he was there to negotiate a lease. Clean shirt. Sunglasses still on. Melissa beside him, holding a tablet with the screen facing outward. And on that screen, Sandra, propped up on pillows, pale, thin, yellow in the way that's hard to look at, but with eyes that were sharp and clear and calculating, even through a 6-inch screen from a hospice bed 60 miles away. We came to support you, sis, Derek said. Loud enough for the room. Warm enough to sound genuine if you hadn't been listening to his voicemails for the past 2 weeks. I looked at the screen. At my birth mother's face. 20 years since I'd seen it. She looked smaller. Older. But the eyes were exactly the same. The eyes of someone always measuring what a room can give her. They hadn't come to support me. They'd come to rewrite the scene. If the community saw Lexi Monroe standing side by side with her family, smiling, forgiving, together in the room she'd built, then Sandra's story held. The long-lost daughter came back at last. Narrative complete. They brought my dying mother on a tablet, propped up like a prop. I stepped up to the microphone wearing Helen's navy blazer, the returned envelope folded over my heart. The room was full. Children sitting cross-legged on the new art room floor. Parents lining the walls. Norma Calloway, our board chair 71, the kind of woman who irons her khakis and takes no grief from anyone, introduced me from the front row. Therese in the third row, reading glasses on, right where she said she'd be. Miss Yvonne in the second row with a corsage on her lapel that she had absolutely put on herself for this occasion because that was Miss Yvonne. And Pastor Webb from the Clover Ridge Community Church in the back, who had driven over just to be a friendly face. He didn't know Derek. He didn't know what was about to happen. He just knew Helen used to bring homemade jam to the church's food pantry every fall, and he wanted to be there when her name went on the wall. I began the way I'd planned. Helen Foster. Art teacher. 27 years in the classroom. A woman who believed that every child deserved a place to make something, not to make it right, just to make it theirs. I told them about the garden, about the way she arranged her shelves, not by medium or by artist, but by what emotion she thought you needed that week. I told them she once gave a student a failing grade on a self-portrait because she said it looked like he was trying to paint who his parents wanted him to be instead of who he actually was. The room laughed. A few older women in the back nodded hard. I told them why I built this room. This room is for every kid who's ever walked into a building and felt like the air itself was telling them they didn't belong. More applause. The easy part was done. Derek stood near the back door with his arms crossed, Melissa beside him holding the tablet. He was smiling the smile of a man who thinks the play is going according to plan. I looked down at the 5-page speech. Then I looked up. Found Patrice in the 3rd row. She gave me one nod. Kind that means I'm right here. I turned to page 3. But I should tell you why the child Helen found at that bus station was there in the first place. Derek's smile went out like a light. The next 5 minutes changed everything. I told them all of it. Slowly. Clearly. The way Helen taught me to approach a painting, one layer at a time, and don't rush the drying. In January, over 20 years ago, my mother drove me to the Grover Falls bus terminal. I was 8 years old. She told me to get out of the car. My brother, who is standing in the back of this room right now, bet $10 I'd cry before she hit the highway. I did not raise my voice. I didn't need to. I told them about CPS, about the 2 phone calls, about Sandra's refusal both times, about Frank's note in the margin of the certified letter, not set up for another kid right now, as if I were a piece of furniture requiring assembly. I told them about the letters. 5 of them. 10 years. Helen reaching out with school photos and report cards and open doors that Sandra never once walked through. I reached into the blazer and pulled out the returned envelope. Held it up so the room could see the blue handwriting on the front. Stop sending these. She's not mine anymore. My mother's handwriting. Written years after she'd left me on that platform. Helen never told me about these letters. She kept them herself, maybe because she thought I'd find them when I was ready to. And my brother's wife is holding a tablet right now with my mother on it, a dying woman propped up on pillows 60 miles away. They brought her here on a screen because they needed the room to see a happy ending. They need that so the story she's been telling her church for 20 years holds up. Derek's voice from the back. That is not what happened. Patrice, from the 3rd row, without standing, without raising her voice, without even looking up from her lap. Sit down, Derek. He sat down. The room was so quiet I could hear the tablet buzzing in Melissa's hands. Sandra was saying something on the screen. But nobody in that room was looking at her anymore. For the first time in 20 years, they were looking at me. Patrice walked to the front of the room, opened a manila folder, and set a single page on the podium beside me. Copy of the original CPS intake report. Names redacted, but the date was right there. The location, Grover Falls Bus Terminal. The narrative summary. Child found unaccompanied on bus platform nighttime January. Mother contacted. Mother declined to retrieve child. Mother declined second contact via certified letter. The room read it the way a room reads a verdict, quietly, all at once, with the slow understanding that someone they thought they knew had been lying to them for a very long time. Pastor Garfield, who had driven up from Hartwell for the event, who had organized prayer circles for Sandra, who had told me on the phone that my mother had carried that pain for a long time, sat completely still in the back corner. His hands were folded. His face didn't move. But his eyes moved. From the document. To Derek. To the tablet in Melissa's hands. And then they stayed on the floor. Melissa turned off the tablet. The screen went dark. Sandra's face disappeared. Derek walked out of the building without a word. He didn't look back. I know that feeling. I learned it at 8. I finished the speech the way Helen would have wanted, with a book recommendation and no tears. I don't hate my mother, I said. Because it was true and because the truth doesn't need decoration. Hate takes energy I would rather spend on this building, on these kids, on the tomatoes in Helen's backyard. But I will not perform a happy ending for someone else's story. I will not sit at a bedside and smile so that a dying woman can feel absolved of something she never apologized for. That's not healing. That's just really convincing acting. I let that sit. If you want to honor Helen Foster today, read Something with a Child tonight. And if someone in your life chose you, a teacher, a neighbor, a foster parent, a stranger at a bus station with peanut butter crackers and the patience to stay, tell them while you still can. Because showing up for a child who isn't yours, who owes you nothing, who has no reason to trust you, that takes more courage than most people will ever understand. Helen showed up every single day for 20 years. And she did it like it was the most natural thing in the world. I picked up the scissors. Walked to the ribbon stretched across the doorway. Blue ribbon. And above the door, in gold letters on navy blue, the Helen Foster Creative Studio. I cut the ribbon. The room applauded the way rooms applaud when they've just watched someone do something brave and they're grateful to have been in the building for it. Pastor Garfield found me in the parking lot afterward. He didn't bring a Bible. He brought a cup of coffee and a silence that said more than most sermons I've heard. He stood beside me for a full minute without speaking. October sun low over the tree line. Leaves skittering across the asphalt. I should have asked more questions, he said finally. I didn't argue. She cried in front of the congregation, Lexi. More than once. She described you. She named you. She made it very real. I believe she cried real tears. Sandra has always known how to feel things loudly in front of an audience. What she never figured out was how to feel them quietly, alone when nobody was watching. He looked at the building behind us. The poster in the window. Helen's name in gold. For what it's worth, he said, you did the right thing in there. Might not feel like it yet. It will, I said. And I meant it. Norma found me next. She wanted to run the story in the community newsletter. I told her no. This isn't a story, Norma. It's my life. Let it stay in this room. She nodded. She understood. By that evening, Patrice called to tell me that Cornerstone Baptist in Hartwell was already asking questions. Pastor Garfield had apparently called a colleague. 20 years of one woman's carefully maintained fiction, undone by 5 minutes of truth. I watered Helen's tomatoes in the dark when I got home. Helen had a saying, the garden doesn't know what kind of day you had, just knows whether you showed up. So I showed up. Derek's last phone call came without the volume, without the threats, without any of the performance. It was the quietest he'd been in weeks. That probably should have comforted me. It didn't. You didn't have to do that in front of everybody. You didn't have to leave me at a bus station. We were kids, Lexi. You were 13. I was 8. You knew exactly what was happening. And she was 34. She definitely knew. A long silence. Kind that sounds like someone sitting in a parked car, staring at the steering wheel, running out of angles. I'm not signing those house papers, I said. And I'm not coming to see Sandra. But here's what I will do. I'll have Patrice handle the property sale, whatever needs to happen to cover the medical bills and clear the account. But I will not stand next to that bed and pretend. He started to say something. She stopped being my mother at that bus terminal in January. Helen was my mother. And Helen would have told me to help you with the house and keep my distance from the rest. So that's exactly what I'm doing. He was quiet for a long time. You really loved her. He wasn't asking. He was just finally understanding. Yes, and I was lucky to have her. She was lucky to have you. No, Derek. I was lucky to have her. There's a real difference. I hung up. Healing isn't something you hand to the person who broke you. It's something you build quietly for yourself in the space where the damage used to live. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is build that space and still keep the door to the past locked tight. The house sold in 14 days. Derek had been trying to move it for over 2 years. Turns out all it needed was the signature of the daughter they threw away. Therese handled everything. I signed the papers at her kitchen table between a plate of shortbread cookies and a stack of property files I didn't read. My share of the sale came to $63,000. Not a windfall. Not nothing. About what a small house in a fading part of Kentucky goes for when the foundation has a crack that runs from the basement to the porch and the gutters are doing their best. I signed every penny of my half over to Sandra's hospice account. Not in person. Through Patrice. I asked Patrice to include a note with the transfer. I wrote it on the back of a receipt from the Arts Center supply room because that felt honest. This money comes with no strings and no visit. Helen raised me to believe that being decent costs something, and I'm paying that cost right now. I hope it covers what she needs. I will not be coming. I wish her peace. Patrice looked at me across the table. You don't have to do this. I know. But Helen would have. Helen would also have had things to say about people who take advantage of generosity. She would. And then she would have written the check anyway. Patrice shook her head. But she processed the transfer. Melissa called 2 days later. No setup, no preamble. Just, can I tell you something? I was on Helen's porch. The light was amber and the garden smelled like turned soil. Go ahead. Sandra got your note. She read it 3 times. Then she held it against her chest and just looked out the window for a long time. She asked me one question. I waited. She said, was Helen good to her? My throat tightened. Not from sadness. From something that doesn't have a clean name, the feeling you get when someone finally asks the right question 20 years too late. Tell her yes, I said. Tell her Helen was everything. She cried after that, Melissa said quietly. No sound at first, just shoulders shaking. Then it came out. Not the polished kind. Kind that means something actually got through. I didn't respond right away. I just held the phone and listened to Melissa breathe. Sandra cried alone, with no congregation watching, no pastor to witness it. For the first time in 20 years, something she did felt like it belonged only to her. I'm sorry, Lexi. For all of it. I'm married into this family and I should have pushed back a long time ago. I know you did your best, Melissa. Thank you for telling me. I sat on that porch until the stars came out, then went inside and made a cup of tea. Sometimes 20 years too late is still better than silence. Person can spend 2 decades maintaining a lie and then fall apart the moment one true thing gets through. That doesn't erase the wall they built. But the falling apart, if it's real, means the wall wasn't made of nothing after all. Sandra died on a Wednesday morning in May. I found out on Thursday. I was in the middle of hanging student artwork on the Helen Foster Creative Studio walls when my phone buzzed. Melissa, Sandra passed peacefully yesterday morning. I thought you'd want to know. The flowers from you were on her nightstand. I read it standing on a step stool with a level in my hand. May light coming through the skylights we'd finally gotten installed. Side through the window, the tomato plants in Helen's backyard garden had their first real leaves of the season pushing through. I didn't go to the funeral. I wasn't expected. I wasn't wanted. I imagined it was small, a handful of church friends, Melissa managing the details, Derek in a borrowed blazer sitting in the front pew staring at the floor. I sent flowers. No name on the card. Just a note. For the woman who gave me life, from the woman who found one. I didn't wait for a response. There was nothing left to say. The days after the dedication were strange. Not bad strange. Just the kind of quiet that settles over things after a long storm finally breaks. People at the grocery store stopped giving me that sideways look. A few of them came up to me and said things like I had no idea or I'm sorry anyone made you feel like you had to explain yourself. Gloria from the book club found me in the produce section and hugged me for a full 10 seconds without saying a single word. That was the right call. The only person who surprised me was Norma. I'd expected her to push harder on the newsletter piece. Instead, she called me the Monday after the dedication and said, "The board voted unanimously to fast-track the expansion funding. We want to add a second studio space. Helen's name goes on both rooms if you want it." I told her I did. She said good and hung up, which is very Norma. The thing about telling the truth in a room full of people is that it doesn't actually feel like victory. Not at first. Feels more like finally putting down something you've been carrying for so long you forgot it had weight. Your shoulders ache differently. You stand a little straighter without meaning to. And you notice slowly that the air around you has changed. That's what the weeks after the dedication felt like. Like new air. Here's what I know now, standing on the other side of all of it. If you have spent your entire life waiting for an apology that never came in the shape you needed it, you are allowed to stop waiting. You are allowed to build the door yourself and walk through it on your own terms. The reading room at the center has been open every day since October. 41 children now have program memberships they didn't have before the fall semester. A 5-year-old named Jalen told me the beanbag chairs in the corner were the greatest invention in human history, including pizza. I told him I would pass that along to whoever was responsible. Miss Yvonne comes in every Thursday afternoon and reads to the littlest kids while I run the older group's art session. She brings oatmeal cookies. Every single week. Without being asked. That's just who she is. The tomatoes will be ready in July. Helen's pasta sauce recipe is still taped inside the cabinet above the stove, handwritten on a piece of notebook paper that's been there so long the edges have started to curl. I'm not moving it. Some things in this life are meant to stay right where they are. Every Thursday at 3 o'clock, I sit in the creative studio with whatever group of kids has claimed the floor that week. Last week it was 6 of them, ages 5 to 10, spread out on the big art rug with picture books and sketch pads, that particular kind of quiet that only happens when kids are actually absorbed in something. A girl named Amara, 7 years old, gap-toothed, hair in 2 big puffs, looked up from her sketch pad and raised her hand. "Miss Lexi." "Yeah? Did somebody really find you at a bus station when you were little?" The room went still in the way rooms do when a child asks the question that adults have been tiptoeing around. "Yes," I said. "A very kind woman did." "Were you scared?" "For a little while. But then I wasn't alone anymore." Amara nodded the way kids nod when an answer is exactly enough. Not too much, not too little. Then she went back to her drawing. I looked at the wall above the door. The Helen Foster Creative Studio, gold letters on navy blue. The framed photo of Helen beside it, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, a paintbrush behind her ear, laughing at something just out of frame. On the supply table by the window, I keep a pack of peanut butter crackers and a small orange juice. Every week. Just because. Amara had left her sneakers by the beanbag chair, little white ones, a little scuffed. I smiled. I looked at Helen's name on that wall and thought about what she would say if she could see this room, these kids, this place we built out of nothing but stubbornness and good tomato soil. She would say, "Well, Lexi, looks like everything took root after all." I used to think my story was about being thrown away. It isn't. It's about who shows up after. I didn't survive to forgive the woman who left me at that bus station. I survived to prove that the little girl she left there was worth more than the family that drove away. And I proved it the only way that actually counts, by building a life worth living and refusing to apologize for it. Helen Foster didn't choose me because she had to. She chose me because she wanted to. A stranger in a parking lot with peanut butter crackers and enough patience to stay until the police arrived, and then enough love to stay for 20 more years. One question. That was all it took. "Have you eaten?" That one question, asked by a woman who owed me nothing, who could have caught her bus and gone on with her day, was worth more than a lifetime of biology without love. I think about her every day. When I'm hanging student work. When I'm watering the tomatoes. When I cut the stems just above the second leaf, the way she showed me when I was 10, crouching in the garden while she talked me through it. When I sit on her porch in the evenings and listen to the crickets, and the sound carries across 20 years like it was only yesterday. If someone in your life chose you, a teacher, a neighbor, a foster parent, an aunt, a stranger in a parking lot, tell them. Tell them today. Don't save it for a speech or a holiday or a moment that feels worthy enough. Just say it out loud in an ordinary moment on an ordinary day. Because walking toward a child who has nothing to offer you, who is scared and small and wearing shoes that don't fit, and staying anyway, that is one of the most quietly extraordinary things a human being can do. And the people who do it almost never find out how much it changed everything. My name is Lexi Monroe. I was left at a bus station with an empty backpack and shoes 2 sizes too big. And I found everything I ever needed. This story meant something to you. If it reminded you of someone who chose you or someone you chose, drop their name in the comments. No explanation needed. Just the name of the person who stayed. This is your first time here, welcome. There are more stories like this one. Check the description, I've left a few you'll want to hear next. Subscribe, hit that bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for staying all the way to the end.